Very welcome everyone to this hybrid event entitled The Power and Energy Systems of the Future, Sustainable, Digitalized, and this is an event jointly organized by IEEE PES Women in Power, CIGRE NGN Next Generation Network, and is co-sponsored by the consortium Digital Future that is based at KTH. And PSPLS Joint Chapter Sweden is a co-host for the event. And in the meantime, we have received the gender ballast certification from Kraftkvinnorna. It's a Sweden-based organization promoting gender balance in leadership, equity, equality in the power and energy sector industry. So we will have a interesting keynote speakers and speeches, and a very interesting discussion is ahead of us in the coming 2 hours. So this is the agenda. We will shortly introduce the missions of IEEE PES Women in Power and CIGRE Next Generation Network, and then we will proceed to our keynote speakers, the experts that will share their experience with us. We will have Olamide, Louise, Robert, and Lars. And then we will wrap up the session with the question and answers. There will be an opportunity to ask a question or two, depending on the time constraints between the presentations. And then I would like to encourage you, but everyone has done that already, to mute yourself, and that works. And if there are any questions, it would be very good if you write in the chat so we can take them in the order of appearance as the presentations are proceeding. And then we will have perhaps a time for a question or two between the presentations. And then in the end, we will allocate a bit more time for some sort of a panel discussion. So there will be more time for that. And the remaining questions, you will be able to, we will forward them to the speakers so they can maybe get back to you, or you can contact them via email if there are many questions and we don't have enough time for that. So my name is Marina Olovic, and today I will act as a moderator for this session. And apart from that, I'm representing Women in Power. I'm a representative for Women in Power in Sweden, for Sweden in Region 8. And we will start this event with a short introduction about the Women in Power mission in general. So I will just provide a bit of background for the WIP, what are the current activities that we have, some key facts, and talk about how to become more active if you're interested in that in a WIP organization and events. So the very mission for the Women in Power is to promote more diverse leadership in power and energy industry. And our highlight words, communication, education, leadership, are used to some extent as a tool to support the career advancement, networking, and education of women in the energy industry. So to get involved and receive more information, you can visit one of these two websites. The first one is for the Power and Energy Society, as the Women in Power are a sub-organization and works under the umbrella of Power and Energy Society. So what do we do? Well, to start with, we're working under the IEEE Institution of Electric and Electronic Engineers, which is the world's largest professional association for advancing the technology. And you've probably heard about that, but it has a global outreach, more than 400,000 members in more than 160 countries, producing technical documents, periodicals, standards, and also has a societal impact via its public policy engagement, humanitarian efforts, focuses on ethics and technology, and so on. So IEEE consists of 39 total technical societies. One of them is Power and Energy Society that WIP is working under. And there are many activities, the technical ones, publications, educational activities, developing standards. There are many technical committees, coordinating committees, and so on. And out of these 39, PS has the second most society members within IEEE after the Computer Society, has reached over 40,000 members in 2019. It is organized in 10 regions. We, Europe, Africa, Middle East, we represent region 8. there are 258 chapters and even more student chapters. So if you're interested in one of these activities, it's a very good way to start being involved, connect to other PES chapters and other organizations, and just get involved. And more than 50% of members are outside of USA in these 150 plus countries. So, but what is the WIP about and the mission? So we work under the umbrella of PES, but are here to promote leadership for professionals in power and energy industry and for their career advancement, for networking and mentorship to develop further their skills. And it doesn't apply only for the academics or even for the engineers. We talk about industry, attorneys, policymakers, accountants, and so on. So how is this implemented in reality? There's a number of workshops and webinars. There is also, we work on promoting women into senior memberships, distinguished lecture programs, or even fellow elevation. There's also an ongoing mentoring program in different regions, and it works well both for the early and the well-established early career professionals and those that are more senior in their careers. And the very mission has started from promoting female power engineers in academia and industry. So not all the parts of the world offer equal opportunities. So that was something that we started from, and it's a globally imbalance is something that's been noticed. But now the mission is evolving into focusing more on diversity, equity, equality on a more higher level. Some key facts and numbers for Region 8. It's a kind of young organization, only few years active, with 140 members in Region 8 in December 2023. And we see overrepresentation of members in Europe in this sub-regional participation in the pie chart. So we would really like to see more members from Africa and Middle East. And all those gray areas, perhaps this is not the most updated because we have new representatives and some are finishing their mandate, would need to have their national representatives. So there is both option to become a national representative or to get involved with their local chapter in one of these purple areas. So how to do that? If you just start becoming a member, you could go to the webpage, and if you're a PES member, it's just click on Join Women in Power. It's 1 minute approximately, and then you can get to know more about WIP events and some funding possibilities and so on. So what we did in the past, these are some examples. There are many WIP panels, one in the general meeting, IEEE Power Africa. We had a local event here at KTH in Sweden with our PSPL's Joint Chapter Sweden, and then another panel at Power Tech, and one more at IGT Europe. So for majority of PS conferences, there is a WIP panel organized, and there is one that is planned for the next ISGT in Croatia. So, and this is kind of a map of what we do. Currently, we have an ongoing WIP mentoring program that carries the name of our previous chair, who has tragically passed away last year. And in that way, we can support early career members to find their own path, either in academia or industry. And then there is something that we would really appreciate to get some more help. So I would really like to encourage you to, or just let us know, or encourage more female IEEE PS members and help us identify those that are eligible to be nominated for a distinguished lecturer program or be elevated to the fellowship level. So this is, we have identified this gap and are working actively, but this still represents a huge challenge. So tips are very welcome. And this shortly about the structure of the mentoring program. So we look for the volunteers, both mentors and mentees. We organize the team, we train the mentors, we define the leaders per region, and then we follow up the program to see how it worked out. So as one example, in the previous year, we had the program, and then we had these 9 pairs of mentors and mentees. and the program has been very much appreciated from both. So it is a very good experience, both being a mentor and mentee. And then how to become more active in WIP. So once again, perhaps this is not the most updated map, but we have a lot of gray area. We need more representatives. If you would like to represent your country in WIP or become more involved in a national chapter in Sweden, you can either contact Yusra. I will provide her contact details, who is our Region 8 chair from Switzerland. Or if you would like to become a Swedish WIP committee member, you could contact me. And then something that's good to outline is that we will need a new representative. I have been the first representative for Sweden, but should not be the last. So this should continue to live after this year. So we have a student member, our student representative, and then we have an anthropologist from Lund University who is also our social advisor. So we will have a call for a new Swedish representative later this year, and more committee members are welcome. So if you would like to get involved, just reach out, send an email, and yeah, it's very possible to become engaged. There are many activities that you could contribute to and be involved with. And how to know more, we're also very active in social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So usually we share the news about the upcoming events, webinars, and other activities there. I would like to thank you for your attention. This was something about WIP, and these are the contact details for me and for Yusra. So if you would like to know more, get involved, just reach out. We would like to see more people being active within this initiative. So I would like to thank you. And if you have any questions, to write in the chat directly now or send an email. Otherwise, I would like to hand over the floor to our CIGRE Next Generation Network agenda. Yeah. To co-organizers of this event. So it's CIGRE Next Generation Network. And here we have Henrik Ekestam on site at KTH, who will tell us a bit more about the mission in general, and then talk about the Swedish chapter before we continue to other two chapters, so Ireland and UK. So these three national chapters have collaborated in organizing this hybrid event. Henrik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marina. As you just said, I will start by introducing the Next Generation Network in general, and then I will talk something about the specifics in Sweden, and then I will hand over the words for Ireland and UK to introduce themselves as well. So perhaps an introduction to what this Next Generation Network actually is. So this is a subcommittee or subgroup of CIGRE in general, called Next Generation Network. And this is the affiliation of CIGRE for especially young members. And when we talk about young members, we are in general referring to people less than 35 years old, but also persons that are perhaps less than 5 or 10 years of experience in the power industry. The exact number varies a bit between the countries. We are also welcoming students to the Next Generation Network. And what we intend to do in this Next Generation Network is allow young engineers and young persons to get to know this wider CIGRE community and to learn and contribute to this community, but perhaps with a slightly lower threshold for participation. So it might seem a bit scaring, for example, to join a working group or something like that as a young person. So we want to lower the threshold for participation. And here you also see some contact details for the local chapters in Ireland, Sweden, and United Kingdom. We are a professional network, and our members are students or young engineers, as mentioned. And what we want these members to do is to engage with different activities related to CIGRE. So in some way, we might be the gateway you could call it. And we want people to develop knowledge, skills, and contacts within the power industry. So not only about CIGRE in general, but also sharing knowledge and also developing skills like networking and international collaboration, and perhaps collaboration outside of your company where you're hired, or outside of academia, for example. So there's different ways you can get involved. So we have our own NGN activities of different kinds. So they could be technical webinars, for example, site visits, different kinds of educational events. We will show you a list of examples for each local chapter later. But you could also get involved in the general CIGRE activities. So that could be international working groups, but it could also be to attend different conferences and write papers and so on. And of course, you can become a member of the National NGN Committee and also the International Committee if you're interested in that. So there's lots of benefits of joining the Next Generation Network. And first, I want to highlight that it's free for students to participate. In some countries, it's also free for the first couple of years in your career. And you can, as mentioned, participate in different events and also participate in different CIGRE activities like these working groups, the steering committees, but you're also allowed to publish papers and participate in the conferences. And in the different conferences, we in some cases have different NGN sections. So it's a bit of a, perhaps let's call it safer environment to present a paper, where you are not expected to be that experienced. We also see that this should be an arena for personal development and also networking. So you will have a possibility to gain different experiences in how to contact people, write papers, networking, and develop yourself more or less. And on a final note, we want to highlight that the intention of all this is to lower the threshold to participate. So you don't need to be an expert, and you're not expected to be an expert to join and participate. And now I'm going to switch and talk a bit about the specific Swedish chapter of NGN. And here you also have my personal contact details. So the Swedish chapter and the Swedish board was reformed in October 2022. We initially tried to form an NGN in Sweden in February 2020, which turned out to be a bit of a bad timing. So we did a second try approximately 18 months ago. So we have been doing this for a year and a half. And the current board in Sweden is represented by members from 3 different companies listed here, and you also have the name of us in the board. So in this year and a half, prior to this date, we have managed to arrange 3 different activities, 2 of them webinars, and we also have a technical site visit. So one of the webinars, the first one, we managed to arrange already 2 months after forming the board. That was a collaboration with the Next Generation Network in Denmark, followed by a webinar of our own last year. And finally, we have this site visit. I have some pictures of that. We actually managed to visit the site where the Swedish TSO is actually building a tunnel underneath the capital of Sweden to be able to transport electricity from one end to the other. So we visited this tunnel site, and we're allowed to see different things, but also got presentations from people working there. So on the left-hand side, we have the persons participating to the event, and on the right-hand side, we have some parts of the board, those that could manage to participate at this stage. So that's also a possibility if you are interested in joining us to participate in these kind of physical events as well. And if you are interested in becoming a member, again, it's free for students. Then you can follow one of these 2 links to find more information on CIGRE in general, but also the next generation network. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn if you want news and updates from our side. And with that, I would like to leave the word to my fellow NGN member in Ireland.
Hi there, thanks, Henrik. Does someone in the room mind driving the slides for me, please, if that's okay?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of the activities and the makeup of the Irish NGN committee. Don't mind going on to the next slide there. Yep. So we have divided up our CIGRE committee in slightly differently into different teams in order to tackle different events and challenges that we have here. So you can see here we've divided up about 10 members on our committee, and we have plenty of space for anyone else who's interested in joining. But we have about 10 members on our committee, and we have 5 different teams there, subcommittees broken up to tackle these challenges here for membership, organizing events, and then communications overall. We find that it makes it a bit easier for getting team-specific attendance and then also organizing specific events with a few less heads in the room and overall and then approval from the wider group after, you know, each team, target team has organized something. I want to go on to the next slide there, please. Yeah, so just as an example of some of the events that we've had, so we do host webinars as well, but the most recent 2 events that we've had, we carried out a site visit to the Dublin Waste Energy Facility. We had about 20 people attend that, very interesting. It's the largest waste energy producer in Ireland, based in Ringsend in Dublin there. And then one of our other competition, one of the other things that we hosted was the NGN presentation competition, where the winner gets to go to CIGRE Paris and represents the Irish NGN there. Manuel was the winner here for his presentation on integration of renewables and curtailment in Ireland at the minute. Yes, so what we try to do is provide value to our members of interesting ways to enrich their careers. So site visits, webinars, participating in these presentation competitions, as well as what Henrik was mentioning earlier about taking part in working groups and submitting papers as well. Yeah, if you can go on to the next slide there, please. And the final slide here I have for you is, sorry, second and final slide here is just our representation at CIGRE 2022. Upcoming in August 2024 is the next large CIGRE meeting. You can see here our members, do take active part. We have David and Jack there on the bottom, both presenting at the poster competition, and a number of our members made contributions during the larger session and working group meetings. So yeah, we do have active members at both the across the levels here, submitting papers and also taking part in working groups. If we can go to the next slide, please. And finally, just an overview of our members here. So as you can see, we have 83 members at the minute. We're trying to increase our numbers at the minute. And as Henrik pointed out earlier, they're mostly young members, student members, and then we have some full members as well. So young members will be at a reduced rate for 2 years after they join. Student members are free, and then full members are, as long as they're in CIGRE over 2 years, they have the full rate there for membership. My company, you can see our breakdown here is largely EirGrid, ESB. In university, we also have a large number of members recently joined from HNMV as well in Ireland, but we're trying to diversify that too and bring in members from across the industry, the power system industry into Ireland, into CIGRE, not just for electrical engineers, but anyone who is working in the power industry. There's a place for you in CIGRE and sort of areas for you to look into. If anyone is interested as well, we have just our QR codes there for the joining in Ireland with student membership and young members sign up as well there on the bottom right. And that's kind of it for me. So anything else there? If you want to move on to the next presenter.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Maria and I'm going to be giving a little presentation on the NGN United Kingdom chapter. You can see my contact detail over there. So our NGN committee is organized. So we have a chair, vice chair, and the secretary and treasurer, which are elected positions. And then we have our little subcommittees, which are usually voluntary roles. So we've got a membership team, communications team, events team, and technical team, as well as some marketing leads and international liaisons. And as you are going to be able to see on the next slide, our committee members are from both industry and academia. So we have committee members from the universities of Manchester, Birmingham, Cardiff, as well as companies such as National Grid, WSP, and Siemens. Can you go to the next slide, please? Here's some more of our committee members and the companies they belong to. Here are some of our recent activities. This was the UK NGN booth and presentations at the Paris sessions in 2022. If you go to the next slide, please. These are some of the recent events we have organized. So we also had Young Members Showcase, in which the winner is going to present at the Paris session of this year. We recently had substation fundamentals training delivered by the UK chair of the B3 technical committee. It was about the protection and control of secondary systems in a substation. And we have organized also a lot of collaborative events, webinars with NGN Austria, Ireland, the Netherlands, and we have organized some site visits, such as to the National Grid Control Room and to the GE Stafford offices. Last year was actually the first year we started organizing in-person events again after the pandemic. And we have had 2 in-person events last year and another one so far this year. So on the next slide, you can see this is where you can keep up with the upcoming events that we're organizing, and you can find more information about joining the UK NGN if you are interested. So thank you. And that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Henrik, Robert, for providing this overview about the CIGRE Next Generation Network. So these slides will be available for sharing after the event. So those that are interested in getting involved can get in touch with you, and if they would just like to know more. Do we have any questions in the chat, perhaps? A lot of thank yous. So thank you very much once again for the presentation. So now we are going to the next point in our agenda. And this is the first keynote speech given by Dr. Olamide Jogunola, who is the lecturer in cybersecurity and smart grids at Manchester Metropolitan University. Dr. Jogunola has a research interest in energy transitions, local energy markets, cybersecurity, smart grids, has received her PhD from MMU and led different tasks within work packages as a research associate at several industries, government-funded projects, for instance, Triangulum project, peer-to-peer energy trading and sharing EPSRC project, NICE project, Nigerian Intelligent Clean Energy Marketplace, and is a recipient of MMU Department of Engineering PhD studentship. She was a principal investigator of SuperGen Network IEEP SRC funded project and co-I in a new WPST funded project on the security implication of interlink computing in critical national infrastructure such as smart grid. And currently she's an academic supervisor on a KTP with the Badger Energy on the development of a secure electric vehicle charging infrastructure mobile application. And Olamide will tell us more about the research and development on energy transition, digitalization, and cybersecurity. So, Olamide, the floor is all yours.
Hi, thank you for having me. Please, could you unshare so that I can share my screen, please? Yeah, if you could stop sharing. Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen okay, please?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, you can hear me fine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. So my name is Olamide, and my presentation today is more of a reflection of some of the projects I've been involved in terms of energy transition, digitalization, and cybersecurity. So I hope at the end of the day, we have some things to discuss about. And if anyone have any question regarding anything I will be presenting, please let me know, and either through email or even before I leave, so that we can provide answers to them. So just a quick one in terms of my research in AI, blockchain, and energy as a whole. And during the introduction, she already mentioned some of the projects I've been involved in, and just to provide a little bit more information regarding them. So peer-to-peer energy trading, most of all the projects are around energy efficiency, cost reduction, data analytics, energy transformation and transition. So peer-to-peer energy trading is a project by PSRC between UK and South Korea government. They're looking at how is it possible for households to share energy. Triangulum is regarding Horizon 2020 project, and it's about smart cities. How can we trial smart energy systems? Energy IQ, which is one of the projects I'll be reflecting on in this presentation, is between UK and Canada government, and it really deals with energy efficiency, smart contracts, data analytics. Then GM-LEN is just trying to see the viability of having a local energy market in Greater Manchester in the UK. So it's still around energy transition and energy consumption. So intelligence offshore markets, it's about integration of AI and blockchain in energy market, in energy network, where you need to develop an intelligence auction-based energy trading. Then interlink computing, it's more about security aspects of systems of systems. So there's something they call supply chain attack, which is more like using third-party applications. So what are the implications of a particular organization has when they depend on a particular third-party applications? If that third party is hacked or maybe attacked, cyber attack, then it may affect that particular organization. And it's what exactly is our critical national infrastructure. So literally looking at the security implication of the coupled system, which is systems of system or interlink computing. Then smart EV, it's more of a KTP. We are looking to develop AI for secure smart EV charging infrastructure. And finally, remarkable, it's a Marie Curie grant, and it's about smart farming, smart contracts, data analytics, and security. So sorry, I had to rush through that because of the time limit I have. Or if you have any question regarding any of the projects, please let me know. So these are some of the partners I've worked with in the past. So the agenda for my presentation will go over energy transition. I'll reflect on two projects under that. Energy digitalization, I'll reflect on one project, and also security risks and uncertainties to energy transition. I'll also reflect on one of the projects I've worked on. So I usually like using this slide as a start because it's literally summarized the entire energy transition in terms of the drivers for it, which is summed as the 3Ds. So the first D is decarbonization, the second one is decentralization, and the third one is digitalization. So as we know that decarbonization is a global exercise in reducing carbon footprints, and because of that, it drives the energy transition into a sustainable, greener energy system, where everyone is shouting net zero, technically. And of course, because of that aim to decarbonization, things like microgrids started coming in, distributed energy system, even the terms like prosumers, they started appearing. And literally, that helps with decentralizing energy generation and transmission and consumption, where we know that since we are all energy experts anyway, know that our traditional mode of energy consumption is from the big generation plant, goes through the transmission network to distribution network to the consumer. But because of the emergence of all these distributed system, multi-vector energy system, we have the second D, which is the decentralization. And terms like prosumer started appearing, where a household that consumes energy, they can also generate via rooftop solar panels. So now we're not thinking of, okay, when they can generate, is it possible for them to even share that energy with their neighbor? So that is where the peer-to-peer energy trading and sharing comes into play. So because sharing energy or trading energy is not something like you buy something over Amazon and they use the postal service to send it to your house. Energy is different. So you cannot go to a neighbor to knock on their door that you need 1 kilowatt of energy, for instance. So how can we do it? Is it visible? Is it achievable? So that is what the research is about in terms of peer-to-peer energy trading. Then the third day is digitalization. And of course, you agree with me that if you want to trade energy, you want to generate energy at the edge of the network, you may need some form of smartness. So that's why we have like smart meters, our IoT, and even data-driven predictive models, which is our AI. It enhances those energy efficiency, reliability to further help with decarbonization, and to some extent cost savings as well. So the first project that I worked on is the peer-to-peer energy trading, which I think I've hinted a little bit about already. So our main aim is that can energy trading be achieved peer-to-peer? So we did like fundamental research to actually look at how can prosumers communicate, how can we match their resources, and even how can we maximize their utility while trading energy. So these are the things we consider, and of course their impact is as there on the slide. And so I made some reference to some articles we published in that regard. So because of our time, anyone that have, we can probably look at those research for the information. But in this fundamental research, we actually apply it to a physical deployment. So this is another project which is nice, Nigeria Intelligence Clean Energy Marketplace. So using our learning from the peer-to-peer energy trading, we got another funding from Innovate UK to actually do this in Nigeria, Abuja to be specific. So we developed a digital twin of what we deployed physically at the lab here at MMU for us to do some optimization and also for scalability. And the challenge we have is that local community in Abuja, they usually do not have electricity supply to their house. And we saw it as an opportunity to try new technology with them. So this is a school at that community. It is Capital Science Academic in Abuja. And this is the neighboring Farah community with less or even no electricity supply. So what we did was to install a couple of energy storage systems and even solar panels at the school. So during the day, when the school is in section, they use that generation within their, the university, the school system. But when in the afternoon, when the school are closed and those probably the neighboring community have back from their work, then they now they feed in all those energy generation from the school to the community for them to use. This is an example of the overall schematic of that connection. So we have the school building over here. We have all the houses down here. And during the day, when the school is using it, most of those houses anyway, they've gone out to work. And when they are back, the school is off section and they can feed in any energy being produced back to the school, back to the houses. So some of the houses have also some minimal generation power, like 1 kilowatt, 1.5, like 2.5. But at the school, they have more capacity than the community. And this shows some of the installations that they did physically doing that regard. And really, this actually made a lot of news because the committee were so happy, they were so grateful because they had access to cold water. So it's actually interesting to see that things are really bubbling up for them and they were really happy for that. So this is the model that we have here at MMU that just shows a smaller scale version of that, something like a digital twin of it. So it helps us to like try to see if we can scale it up, how we can optimize some part of it, and also good for research. So now I'll move on to digitalization. So as I've said, mainly based on smart meters, smart systems, IoT, data-driven predictive model. So there's this particular project that we did between the UK and the Ghana and Canada, and also we have some published articles in that regard. So the essence of this is actually to see how we can use how can smart services accelerate flexibility provision for cost savings, for SMEs, and also for domestic energy users. So this is looking at businesses and also residential people and how we can use like AI predictive model and also use that to get what they want to consume. And through that part, we can offer them other flexibility services. So in regards to that, we developed a particular predictive framework. So it's a hybrid deep learning comprising of LSTM, AE, CNN. And using that model, we were able to predict what they will consume in the next time slots, like in the next day, in the next 1 week, in the next 1 month. So based on that, we were able to like offer them some services. It's similar to like demand response, but this time around, it's more tailored to their particular need because they can know what they will consume in the future, which help them to hedge ahead appropriately. So it was an interesting research anyway. And of course, when we compare our model to the benchmark, we got higher accuracy as compared to what is in the literature. So you can see this link is there for further research or probably to learn more about it. But one interesting thing is that using that model that we developed, we were able to use it in another study. So this particular post-study, post-COVID energy consumption forecasting is interesting because so imagine the energy predictions they predicted in maybe early 2019, according that, okay, maybe by first quarter of 2020, this is the energy consumption that will be for this particular businesses or household. However, because of the all those measures put in place in COVID period that everyone should stay home, that actually tipped that scale of energy consumption. So which means those prior model will not probably function well or maybe get wrong results because no one predicted that COVID will happen and to result in people staying home and not going to work. So energy consumption at home increased while the one for businesses reduced. So this is an example of a industry partner that we are working with. And you can see here that this is for 5 different commercial buildings as part of their data. So this is the data from 2018, 2019. You can see that April 2020, there's a huge, like a massive drop of energy consumption at that point, simply because it is April 2020 and everyone is staying at home. So which means there's no activity going on in those commercial buildings. So, and we can see it's gradually picking up at June, then August, October, at the restrictions started easing up. So using that, we initially thought that, oh, will this model perform with that data? Because now feeding that in, we screwed the model. But we actually surprised to get a very good prediction, which further shows that the model actually is very good. And this actually happened when we were trying to present the results to the business partner. And interestingly, he was like, oh, I have the real data and I will just confirm it with what we have. And we were surprised when they confirmed our prediction with the real one. And it was very close, so which was actually interesting. So that helps. It's part of what we are doing as well in terms of our using AI and smart things for businesses. So which is very good. So and finally, sorry, I'm conscious of time. In terms of security, so while energy transition has been interesting and helping life, of course, we also have to consider some hindrances to that. So in terms of security, there are vulnerabilities available almost everywhere. So take, for instance, our SCADA system. How do you ensure or secure data communication between the SCADA system and the whole energy system? I'm sure we all know what a SCADA system is because we are energy experts anyway. And also in terms of technology risks itself, even while we're using AI for digitalization, how secure is that? How ethical is it? And even blockchain, because most of the current pilot projects for peer-to-peer energy trade, energy transaction, like energy market, are based on blockchain system. So do we trust the system? Is it regulated? And several other concerns regarding that. And this supply chain attack that I mentioned earlier on, system of system, what happens to it? And several other things, even with the increased smartness, like using IoT in our smart meters and all that, how are data collected? The IoT aspect increases the attack surface, leading to more vulnerabilities within the system. So if we check the recent news, we can see a lot of things happening in that regard. So take, for instance, the IEEE recently reported that the average number of weekly cyber attacks per organization, this particular grade is for utilities, which also includes gas, electricity infrastructure. So they said the average weekly cyber attacks doubled every week from 2020 to 2022. So which means the attack surface has increased due to all this emergence of data and all that. And that means that we need more secure way to think about our system. So recently, this 2024, this PWN 21 Automotive, they had organized a particular event that they invited hackers, bug bounties, security researchers to come and exploit vulnerabilities within Tesla system, electric vehicle charger, infotainment. So because EV charger, of course, it's part of our energy transition. We are moving on from the carbon intensive to very clean one. So, and they were able to win $1.3 million during that event because they found vulnerabilities within the systems and they were able to hack it. So it is interesting to say that these things are coming on, and seriously, it's 2024. And of course, while that was the success, and also we have top Python developers being hacked in sophisticated cyber chain attacks. So which means we should be conscious of it, and at the same time, maybe that also requires some training and retraining. If top people are being hacked, then that is trouble. So in that regard, we also looked at another project which was funded by NatWest Partnership Security Trust, and it's the interlink system that I talked about earlier on, like system of system security. So this is more looking at a Delphi study where we recruited some experts to predict like futuristic smart grid manager and several other experts within that space. And we interviewed them based on some predefined questions, like what do they think would be the greatest risks to like critical national infrastructure, e.g. smart grid in the future. So looking at 2040. Then after the interview, we got their responses and we did the code transcripts. And after that, we send it back to them again to review those arguments that they agree with it or not. And we now wrote a report. It's a recent article we published this year, 2024. And I will use their responses as the future outlook. So one thing that they all agree on is cutting corners in safe AI. I think AI it's a major thing to our digitalization, really. And they said by 2040, there will be a lot of cutting corners in safe AI. You can see that all the experts agree to that statement. And some even said it could lead to a mega death incident. And some said they cut corners due to regulatory capture. And also, some said because AI has developed exponentially. So those things could lead to us cutting corners in developing AI. And apart from that, there could be trouble in distinguishing between truth from fiction. And that is literally just happening now. Because like I saw a news recently by Telegraph saying that these two pictures, one is AI and one is real. So can you identify the fake one? So if you're using all these AI for our smart grid, then what is the future? Like, how do you ensure that they are safe to actually do what they're doing? That's a big question. And again, there are other things regarding like, okay, you cannot distinguish accidents from incidents. So which means you may want to do something else and something else resulted from it. So I think it's just looking at the future and what would the security landscape be to energy transition, really. So of course, if you want more information regarding the research, the article is right here. I think that is my last slide. So, and I think I'm within time. So thank you very much for listening. I'll take any question now, please.
Thank you very much, Olamide. Do we have some questions here or within the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask a question?
I have a question about the Nigeria Clean Energy project that you were talking about. You mentioned that you set up a digital twin at your university for optimizing the model.
Okay.
So I was just wondering if digital twins can be used for other purposes, such as research on the security of the energy networks.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So regarding that aspect, in fact, recently there is a UKRI call, which is not open yet, but they've put it on their website that they want to use digital twin for cyber resilience in energy network. So really, that seems to be like the next point of action, because with digital twin, you could see the model, you could do a lot of research within it. You could even have like a model that people can hack into just to check if it's resilient, if it's secure enough before you can deploy that part. So yes, a digital twin can be used for a lot of other things.
Thank you.
Do we have any other question? Perhaps it's good to outline that Olamide has a lecture now and will leave, so she will not be here for the question and answer session. So
Yeah,
speak now or never, or send an email to Olamide. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. But maybe I can ask one question before you go for your lecture. So
Okay.
like, how's people behavioral change a risk to energy transition?
That's actually interesting because, okay, yeah, take for instance, part of the energy transition is like all these electric vehicles I just talked about now. And in that regard, okay, take for instance, I have an electric vehicle, and of course, before I got it, there was a lot of debate regarding when do I charge, because I have to wake up in the middle of the night to charge it, but of course, you can charge it maybe before and use your app to check it on. Mile anxiety. The other day I wanted to go to Sheffield, and I was like, the mile range between my house and Sheffield is like 63 miles. And if I go and come back, that's around 130 something. And my maximum range is like 160. So can that accommodate it. So it's more of people and their behavior. Are they ready to accept or embrace the change in terms of the maybe little discomfort it could be, and also that leads to maybe like the government also. If there's more incentive for people to do that, then that would be good. I would say by using that electric vehicle, I've literally been able to save on my electricity bill, for instance, because the tariff they give at night is cheaper than doing it day. So incentives like that may be something that people might want to take it up and do. So yeah, behavior, it's a lot with people. And of course, them know, maybe like more training, more lectures of the benefits of all this transition could also help them too. So yeah.
Thank you very much for a very good
Thank you very
presentation,
much.
Olamide,
Yeah.
and for your
So any more
presentation and
questions,
contribution.
please? Okay, yeah. So any more questions, you can send it to my email. I have to go now for my lecture. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have fun. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we can proceed to our second keynote speaker. This is Louise O'Flanagan, who is Head of Engineering and Asset Management at EirGrid, the Irish TSO, which she joined in 2011. And she previously had held a number of roles, including offshore program manager and connection projects team lead. She worked across a broad portfolio of transmission and interconnector projects. And prior to joining EirGrid, she worked with Grontme consultant engineers in the water industry based in Ireland and UK. She's also a fellow Engineers Ireland, holds a bachelor and master's degree in engineering science from University College Dublin, and will tell us a bit more about the journey to plan-led offshore wind in Ireland. So, Louise, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Would you mind, I'm sorry, I'm sharing a speaker with Robert, so that's why it will appear that Robert is speaking, but it's actually myself. Would you mind sharing the slides from the room, and I'll ask you to move them if that's okay.
Share their slides, yeah. Mm-hmm. We can share the PDF. That's good enough.
Perfect. Yeah, it will be.
Yep.
So once again, thank you very much for the invitation to join today. And I suppose I took it as an opportunity maybe to give some insight to the work that is underway in Ireland. I know every country is going through an energy transition at the moment, but we're particularly, I suppose, exciting times in Ireland, and very glad to be able to support that in our role as the transmission system operator and what EirGrid can do in that transition. So today is just I suppose, a very brief introduction to some of the work that we have underway, if you wouldn't mind changing the slide. So Ireland has a very ambitious target that I've just given you I suppose a snapshot of. We've set in place legislation actually that embeds this and makes it a legally binding target. The Climate Action Act, or the Climate Act of 2021, put together a clear path to have emissions in Ireland by 2030 and to achieve net zero by 2050. And it introduced carbon budgets for each sector. And the Climate Action Plan sets out those steps that need to be undertaken to achieve that ambition. And really it's that it recognises the electricity sector had probably the greatest ability to transition away from carbon heavy emissions and to the use of renewable electricity sources. So it set out this ambition that we would have a transmission grid able to accommodate up to 80% of our electricity from renewable sources by 2030. And a key part of it, our ability to achieve that, would be the utilisation of offshore wind, which was set at 5 gigawatts. And just to kind of put those figures into context for you, if I were to look at what the demand on the system was yesterday, you'd probably see that the peak demand on the system was just under 6 gigawatts. So we're talking about introducing 5 gigawatts capacity of offshore wind onto the grid within the next 6 years. So it's quite an ambitious plan. But also just to recognise that the current connected capacity of offshore wind in Ireland at this moment in time is 25 megawatts, and it's connected at a distribution level. So as it stands, we have no offshore wind connected in Ireland at the moment at transmission level. So these are very new, exciting projects that we want to see realised to help us get to that ambition of 80%. And really what the grid is going to have to do in terms of getting to the 80%, that will also be complemented by the connection of onshore renewables and other technology on the grid to help us support that transition away from conventional generation to renewables. Another figure, just to put it in context, is that about 40% of our demand yesterday was met by gas on our system. So you can see, and actually it was 40% renewables, and that was a really good day on the grid actually to say that. But even that ambition to double that again, for example, by 2030 is a significant ask. And there's a huge amount of support behind that, not just within EirGrid, but also within government and the other state actors that will make that realisable. If you wouldn't mind going just to the next slide. I was very fortunate enough to be part of a government working group that was established in 2019 to look at what were the key enablers for offshore wind in particular. Some projects had been around for some time, maybe a decade, but failed to actually get out of the feasibility stage, if you will, and to be actually realised and brought onto the grid. So the group was looking at what were the blockers for offshore wind in Ireland at that time. And we recognised that there was probably three legs of a stool here, if you like, that needed to be addressed. And each one was as important as the other, that no one part of this could proceed any faster or any slower than the other, that all three were needed. And the first one is consent. You need to have a development consent for a project. And the next part of that was access to grid. And the third is a route to market. And so the group worked for a period over about 12 to 18 months to look at very distinct steps and the dependencies within those three legs of the stool, if you will, that would make offshore wind realisable in Ireland within the next decade. In terms of consent, in Ireland at that time, we didn't have a single consenting agency that would look after development in the marine environment. So we had the introduction of a marine spatial framework, planning framework, with new legislation brought in this time frame. And we recognised that that was a key enabler for not just offshore wind, but any new offshore renewable energy project that wanted to be developed off the land of Ireland. Up until that point, the state agency only was permitted development within the high water level mark and onshore within Ireland. So it needed to change if we were going to see offshore wind projects develop. We also needed a new agency set up, that's the Maritime Area Regulatory Authority, and that gave permission for projects to be developed using the seabed. And so all of these things needed to come together for projects to be able to get development consent for offshore projects. The next one was a route to market. So up until 2020 in Ireland, we had a feed-in tariff system, and that was being phased out, and the introduction of a new contract for difference. So the renewable energy support scheme auctions were introduced. And what we recognised was that if we have auctions for projects that are onshore, typically what we have is a large number of participants with smaller scale projects. And that really wasn't fit for purpose where we look at offshore, where we have a smaller number of participants with very large capacities bidding in. So ultimately, it was recognised that we needed a new auction system solely for getting offshore wind projects a route to market in Ireland. And then I suppose the last 2 points that I've raised there, and these are probably the most pertinent to EirGrid in our role as TSO, was what framework would be used to developing the offshore transmission system and a phased transition between that. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail in the next slide. And I suppose what was the next outcome, and the final one, I suppose that really was a very exciting moment for EirGrid, was the designation of EirGrid as the system operator and asset owner of Ireland's offshore electricity transmission system. For those of you that might not be familiar with our transmission system in Ireland, we have a separate transmission asset owner for the onshore grid, that is ESB network. But this policy recognised that EirGrid would become the asset owner as well as the operator for the offshore transmission system. And so there's two key points there. One was that it was not going to remain in private ownership, that this is critical national infrastructure, and therefore a state agency or semi-state body will be best to own that infrastructure in the longer term. But also that the future of the energy transition didn't just lie within the shores of Ireland, we were likely going to see further interconnection. And given where the direction of travel was going in Europe, probably likely to see maybe interconnection of wind farms offshore with other interconnector projects. So there was a really good synergy there. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Just a little bit more about that policy decision, and that's, I suppose, the title of my presentation is This Journey. This isn't something that's going to happen in a matter of years. This will happen over decades. And so the government realized that there were a number of projects that were already at early stages of development, but that represented the greatest, quickest deployment of offshore wind in Ireland. And this is what's called a decentralized phase. So really what we're looking at is that the developer of the wind farm has greater, I suppose, decision-making over where they might connect onto the grid, what the technology that they might use, and they have a greater flexibility or ability to define those. And that the grid developer is nearly reacting to where they want to connect onto the grid. But really, in terms of quick deployment, they were further along in that journey. So the first RES auction, ORES 1, was set up around those projects in mind. But ultimately, the assets that were built would transfer to EirGrid once they were energized. And then if I jump to the third part of the slide, where it says centralized, that is where the TSO takes on a greater role of planning where on the grid we want to see offshore wind connected. Given the scale of these projects, they're quite significant. So how can we bring together a synergy between where the grid onshore is and where that capacity is, coupled with where we might have offshore wind developed? And then that is where EirGrid will take over a greater role in terms of defining where on the grid projects connect, where the offshore generation zone would likely be developed. And EirGrid would then be responsible for the delivery of all the assets to connect the generation. So the part in the middle is just that transition, and it recognized the policy that we weren't going to be able to jump straight to the kind of enduring centralized model by 2030. So that's kind of post 2030, we will be in a centralized delivery model, and that the phase that we're in at the moment, phase 1, is decentralized, and that there was a transition period in between. It's still to be delivered by 2030, but it could be either developer-led or it could be TSO-led. But ultimately, all the assets then will still transfer and be operated by the TSO. And if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. And really to support that decision-making for the government, EirGrid commissioned a report by Consultants Navigants, which looked at offshore grid delivery models for Ireland. Really, as I said, Ireland is by no means the leader of offshore wind at all. With 25 megawatts, we looked to where other countries had gone before us to learn from them. And that was really beneficial. So we commissioned this report to look at those jurisdictions that had already developed offshore wind, what learnings could we take, and what were the grid delivery models that they had in play. So predominantly it focused on Northern Europe and some offshore wind in the US and some in Asia. And what it looked at was the different models would be like the offshore model, which predominates in the UK, versus a TSO-led approach in the likes of the Netherlands and Belgium. It set out what it thought to be the pros and cons, but also in an Irish context. So what works in one jurisdiction might not necessarily work in the other. And it created a recommendation, which I'll go on to in a few more minutes. But that was the basis of the policy decision. The government recognized that there were benefits to each of the grid delivery models, but ultimately the greatest benefit would be in a centralized approach. So with the policy decision in 2021, where it set out that phase transition, it also then further published a policy decision in 2023 that said to accelerate that transition towards a centralized approach, and ultimately asked EirGrid to look at developing projects, and we're focusing at the south coast of Ireland at the moment. But really to make sure that we meet our 2030 targets, could EirGrid now start accelerating some of those projects through a centralized model? And this was really, as I said, in order to meet what was required by the 2030 5 gigawatt need. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So where are we at the moment, just in terms of this journey? And we're still, quite early on in it. And the first auction was held last year, and there were 4 projects. And they are 3 of them off the east coast of Ireland and 1 off the west coast. And that yielded 3.1 gigawatts of contracts out of the ORES 1 auction. We're now in phase 2 as well. That'll run in parallel. That's more of a plan-led approach, with EirGrid looking at developing capacity of 900 megawatts off the south coast of Ireland. And obviously, if you've done the maths, you can see that that doesn't get us to 5 gigawatts. So there is still an opportunity for some of those projects, the 2 unsuccessful ORES 1 projects, to find a route to market through the likes of corporate PPA. And so that would then get us to the 5 gigawatt target by 2030. And then beyond that, it recognises that Ireland has a vast wealth of resources here that could be harnessed. And so we know that beyond 2030, we will look towards a 2 gigawatt target initially, but there is far greater resources out there, and particularly if we look at technologies such as floating wind. For those first 2 phases, it will very much have fixed bottom will predominate for that technology. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So some of the benefits that were called out in the Navigant report of moving to a plan-led or centralized model is that you have firstly that greater efficiency, coordination of where onshore grid has capacity and where we want to connect it into. So firstly, that has the benefit then of maximizing the grid we already have and reducing additional build onto the system. And in terms of the delivery timelines, recognizing that it can take quite a long time to develop transmission infrastructure, this is a key benefit for it as well. There's also there an opportunity to optimize and create efficiencies during the operational phase of the offshore grid, because you can have a single party now responsible for operations and maintenance of the transmission system. It also brings about a better ability to standardize, introduce future proofing where we have known plans or where we have plans for interconnection. And we can also look to facilitate larger, more distant projects by being able to fund that and tap into it. And it also recognizes that the likes of hydrogen or other power to gas projects will feature in what the grid of the future will look like. And lastly, and really important to EirGrid, and really important, I suppose it was recognized in the government policy, is public acceptance and the ability of stakeholders of the public to participate in the development of projects. So if you have one party responsible for the delivery of that, it lends itself to greater coordination of public engagement and public acceptance of projects. And that's something that's really important to EirGrid, is engaging with our stakeholders when we're delivering new transmission projects. And ultimately, with that overall reduction, hopefully in infrastructure build, that's also seen as a positive in terms of public acceptance. So the recommendation, and that's what's called out in the blue box, is the centralized development model was recognized as generating the maximum societal benefits due to natural monopoly efficiency. And that's ultimately what was called out in government policy. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Just in terms of Ireland's energy resources, Ireland has a significant sea area that we can harness, far greater than our land mass actually. And we recognise that this is something that we will outstrip our current needs on this island at some point. For example, as I said, we will have growth. We know that there will be, obviously, to meet the energy transition, a further electrification of our lives. However, at some point, the amount of offshore wind resources we have available to us far outstrip the need that we have in the island of Ireland. And that then will look to other markets of where we might be able to export that to, or other technologies that might be able to make use of it. But as you can see, just in terms of the synergy that's there for those first round of projects, particularly on the east coast, that is where Ireland's greatest load centres are. So Dublin, the capital city, has the greatest demands on the grid, and therefore to be able to use renewable energy sources that are essentially on the doorstep offers us a huge opportunity to reduce the amount of build of onshore grid as well, to get the generation to where it's actually going to be used. And that's been quite different to some of the models that we've seen for the onshore renewables, where they have tended to be maybe in more western or southern areas, requiring grid to be built to bring them up to the load centres. And then the other point was that we have further interconnection to France underway. Our Celtic Interconnector project is due to be delivered in 2026. So that also offers up an opportunity of where the grid is being developed on the south coast too. And then just to my last slide. So I just wanted to finish on this slide, just to kind of put in context what it is that we're describing in terms of the grid itself. So for this first phase, the offshore and generation zone, all of the transmission infrastructure required that is offshore, so the substation and export cables back to shore. There will be an onshore compensation compound of where we have the shunt reactors and STATCOMs installed, harmonic filters, and that then connects onto the mesh transmission system on the other side that's owned by ESB Networks. So in this first phase, the developer will be responsible for the planning, consenting, design, financing, procurement, construction, and commissioning of not just the generation zone, but also the transmission infrastructure associated with that offshore. It will then meet the grid onshore and connect into it at certain nodes. In phase 2, EirGrid will now be responsible for doing exactly the same, but up to the point of the offshore substation. After that, the development of the wind farm itself will remain with the developer. But ultimately, all of that infrastructure will then transfer or already be developed by EirGrid to own and operate and maintain. So look, I just wanted to finish there, but thank you very much. That is just I suppose a whirlwind of the work that's been underway in Ireland just over the last 5 years. It is a journey. We are on our way there, and I would look forward to maybe in the future giving you an update on how that's progressing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Louise, for the very interesting presentation and providing the Irish perspective. So do we have some questions from the audience in the room or online?
Yes.
Per?
Yes, Per Westerlund. I wonder, you said that now you're going to connect to the transmission grid. So what is the difference from a technical perspective? And you talked about the distribution grid. What is the main technical difference, and what are the main challenges going upwards?
I think the first key difference that I see is the scale of these projects. They will be connecting predominantly at 220 kV. So one of the biggest challenges with that is just the scale of the development itself. So the substations, the cables, finding routes, particularly around Dublin, it's our capital city, so line constraints can be a challenge. But it is, as I said, it's about bringing all of those parts of it together and recognizing where there's capacity on the grid as well to inject that large amount of renewables onto the system. There's also then, I suppose, the other challenge for the network planners is the fact that we will then be displacing conventional generation, and that obviously brings other benefits with it. So it in turn will need other technologies to support that as we take the conventional generation off the grid. And then I suppose the third point is back to the scale. These are really large projects, very large turbines in large numbers off probably the most populated part of the island. So the stakeholder engagement, in my view, is really important here. At present, there are 7 small turbines off the southeast coast connecting in to the distribution system. Now we're going to have significantly greater scale and numbers of projects being developed altogether. So there's a coordination needed there to let the public understand what is needed and what these projects are bringing and the benefits, coupled with the fact that we will also have onshore reinforcements required to support that. We have a major project underway, which would be a presentation all of itself. We're currently replacing a lot of our older grid within Dublin City itself, our older cables, because not just from an asset management perspective, they're coming to end of life, but their capacity in terms of their ratings aren't where technology is at now. So we'll have an opportunity to be able to export that and transmit that power around the city as we need to. So.
Thanks. We have another question in the chat, online audience.
Thanks, Louise. May I ask my questions about the just future of the renewable in Ireland? Do you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, introduce myself. I am Ehsan from UCD Ireland, and I am wondering about the inertia, because the inertia is a concern for just when penetrating the renewable energy into the grid. And do you have any idea about how to just manage this problem in the future of EirGrid? Thank you.
I am going to be very honest, Esham, that is not my area of expertise. It really is for the network planners, but I can just maybe give you a very brief answer, but very happy for you to email and we can get you maybe a more in-depth answer to it. But you're right, as we bring renewables on, that is going to have an impact on the inertia on the system. So we will need other, other system services to support that as we transition away. Obviously, we have the benefit of the conventional generation that we've had on the system for SNSP. As that increases, then we're going to have a challenge there as well. So that I don't want to say much more because I wouldn't even be able to do it justice, but very happy for you to reach out, and my colleagues would be able to give you a better understanding of what EirGrid has planning. And we do have quite a lot underway in terms of our recent studies are shaping our electricity future. I don't know if you've seen that, it's certainly available on our website. And we have done reaching out to various stakeholders on the work that's underway there. And that shows what needs to support not just offshore wind, but all of the renewables that we're going to be bringing onto the grid and the transition we need to make. So there's the grid aspect to it. Then there's also the market aspect and the other kind of network planning that we need to bring on board with that as well, and new technologies to support it. So very happy for you to drop me an email and we can try to get you more information on it.
Thank you, because I am also a Nexus member, so maybe we'll be in contact after this presentation. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the questions and very good answers. For the sake of time, now we proceed to our next speaker. This is Professor Robert Eriksson, who is a professor at Uppsala University and power system specialist at the Swedish TSO Svenska kraftnät. Robert has received his master and PhD degrees from KTH, of Technology, Stockholm, and from 2013 to 2015, he's also served as an associate professor at the Center for Electric Power and Energy at the Technical University of Denmark. Since 2015, he's back to Sweden and has held the position of power system specialist at Svenska kraftnät, while additionally he served as an adjunct professor at KTH here at Royal Institute of Technology. And currently, he holds a full professorship in the Division of Electricity at Uppsala University, while also maintaining a part-time position at the Swedish TSO Svenska kraftnät. And Robert will tell us about the ancillary services of the future.
Thank you very much, Marina.
Robert has sent his presentation.
Get my slides on the screen.
Yes, yes, that one. These are your slides.
Yeah. So I will be talking about ancillary services of the future. And this is a project that I'm starting up at Uppsala University. And this is, of course, my view of how to look at ancillary services in the future. And when I refer to ancillary services, I refer to all kinds of functions that is required in the power system. So not only services that are related to frequency and balancing. I've been part of the team that have designed new technical requirement for the frequency services in the Nordic power system. And in that work, we were looking at how to design these products for the future power system. But we also realized that there were a lot of design parameters that we have to select. So we had to make a lot of best guesses how the future power system would look like. And the ideas of what I'm going to present is sort of moving away a bit from these design parameters that we needed to select. So just a short introduction. So if you want to operate a power system, you simply need to keep voltage, frequency, and power limits. So you need to keep those within acceptable limits. Okay, it may sound very simple, but it's not for sure. So for every hour in operation, you are doing a lot of planning, you're doing a lot of preparation in order to be able to manage. Of course, you also need some kind of tools in operation. So you need some functions that you can rely on in order to keep these variables within these limits. And in the control room, you have different functions. So this is a picture from the Swedish TSO control center, where you can see that they're very busy working, keeping the lights on. And about these limits, those are often stipulated by grid code requirements. So for frequency, for instance, in the Nordic power system, we have a range of plus minus 1 Hertz if we have large events. And in operation, you always have to be prepared for disturbances. So you need to have functions in the system to handle those disturbances, but also functions to handle variations that happen due to load changes and so on. And in order to keep stable and reliable operation, you need automatic control actions, because your phenomena in the system, those are very fast, so you need this automatic control. And also this is some kind of simplification again. So what you actually need to do is to keep some kind of balance between consumed and produced reactive power, and similar for active power. But what you also have to do is to keep those in balance for all types of time ranges. So you have very fast phenomena, like you have some switching in converters and so on, up to slow balancing within the hour. And if you would like to classify your power system phenomena, some years back we had 2 new phenomena introduced, apart from the previously recognized phenomena like the rotor angle stability, voltage stability, and frequency stability, but we also got the resonance stability and converter-driven stabilities. And the resonance stability and converter-driven stabilities, those are very fast phenomena. And those are either depending on components that are having some resonance in between, or it could be that you have control systems giving these kind of oscillations. So how you tune your controller and design your functions are very important in order to keep the stability. So about the ancillary services. So the ancillary services are referring to a range of support functions that are necessary to have reliable operation of the power system. And these services help to maintain the balance between the electricity supply and demand, and also stabilize the grid in terms of frequency and voltage in order to keep overall reliability and security of the power grid. And these services can be divided into different types. So we have the inherent types, which are, for instance, inertia coming from synchronous machines. So that's how they are designed. So this inertia is then trying to keep the frequency unchanged, basically. But we also have electromagnetic responses also from synchronous machines. It's also inherent how these are constructed. And then we also have control types of ancillary services. And those could be products on the market where you are procuring and selling these kind of ancillary services. Or they could also be required by network codes where you are trying to define how different types of units should contribute with these services to the grid. And some examples are, let's see, the K factor, so how much fast fault current injection converters should provide to the system in order to keep the voltage within limits during faults. It could also be reactive power to control the voltage in the grid. So if we have technical requirements, then we can define products that are following these requirements. And often you formulate requirements so that you have very well-defined products like the Lego pieces here. Those are illustrating different types of products. So in this case, you can compare the different colors. So you can compare different pieces. And if you need, let's say, 4 pieces of the green ones, 1 of the blue, 2 of the red, and so on, you can buy any of these pieces in the same color. So you can replace one piece by similar color. But what if you as a provider, if you have a unit that is not able to provide any of these colors, but you can still provide something that is useful for the power system? How would you be able to define such a product or such a service? So that's one of the drawbacks of having well-defined technical requirements, where you have very small freedom to provide other types of services. And this figure to the left is illustrating the supply of ancillary services. So that's the blue line. And to the left, you have simple requirements, meaning that you will be able to provide a lot of services with very loose requirements. But if you move to very complex and more strict requirements, you will get less of these services. And then the purple dashed line is then illustrating the system needs. Of course, the system need will depend on the operating conditions and so on. So that is also a challenge in itself to define how much we need. So the system needs, so what kind of pieces of Lego do we need in order to build up a secure power system? We know that we need some inertia, we need some system strength, and so on. But those are also influencing how much of these pieces we need. Another thing is also what kind of robustness do we want? How robust do we want to make the power system? Should we be able to withstand n-1, n-2? Or should we look at probabilities? What kind of fluctuations do we expect? What should we design our power system for? So this kind of design criteria were perhaps a bit more clear when we built the power system back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But now, since we have a lot of more renewables, changing power flows, we have a market for electricity and so on, it's not so easy to define these criteria to design how you should ensure that you have a robust power system. The figures below is taken from a report that was published last year by the Nordic TSOs. And the different colors are illustrating how large share of IBRs, so inverter-based resources, we have in the system. So this is kind of, should we say, what worst case? I'm not sure the wind power would like to hear that, but worst case in terms of not having so much synchronous penetration in the system. So we can see that until 2031, we could actually have up to 100% of inverter-based resources in some regions for some hours. And I was checking last week, and we actually had over 55% wind power in the Swedish power system for some time, which is actually quite high. And I don't know if the Svenska kraftnät has analyzed how everything is kept within limits due to this penetration. But it worked, so don't touch.
Don't mess.
Yeah. And now coming to a bit of the core to look at how we can define these quality metrics of the different ancillary services, where we are sort of having the approach of pay-per-performance. And on the one hand, we have the performance of the power system and performance of the ancillary services, which is sort of the speed of the response. And on the other hand, you have the stability of the overall system, but also at the connection point. So those are often a trade-off. If you make the response faster, you are sort of reducing the closed loop stability. And those could then, of course, be two metrics, how to define these kind of ancillary services. And as one example, if you look at the frequency containment reserve, you can make the response faster. So, but on the other hand, you will not be able to handle the closed loop system, which then could relate to the system inertia. And similar, if you're having some converter that is controlling the voltage, if you have a lower system strength, you perhaps need to slow down your response in order to get a stable system. So that was all. So any questions?
I have a question. You talked about design criteria and different limits for things like frequency and voltage and so on, and that the aim of the ancillary services should be to keep these parameters within this design limits. But sometimes we might have large incidents or other things that might make us violate these kind of limits. Do you foresee a need for ancillary services in those instances as well, or should we handle them in other ways, those kind of incidents?
I would say that, I mean, these ancillary services should be able to handle all different types of system states in one way. So you have different levels of defense. So perhaps these are not necessarily only related to the normal state or n-1 events. But of course, it's a very interesting question to see how robust you need to make your system and what type of ancillary services you need for different type of disturbances and system states. And also to mention that it might not be that one has to pay for all these kind of system or ancillary services. It could also be that you require them in order to have a secure operation, but maybe you need to adapt your requirements a bit depending on the system conditions and how the units are designed, if they can provide the right amount and so on.
Thank you. Do we have another question, perhaps in the chat online?
Excuse me, I have the same question from Prof. Gupta.
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. I want to know what is his suggestion for future inertia and the problem of just inertia in the renewable energy networks.
Well, I mean, it's of course good to have high inertia, then you have less problems. But I believe, I mean, you can provide faster services like the fast frequency response, and that can replace lack of inertia. So yeah, maybe if you go very low in inertia, maybe you need some grid forming capabilities in order to keep your system stable.
Oh, means grid forming inverters, means you suggest grid forming inverters.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that could be one solution if you have very low inertia. Or you can of course also go for synchronous compensators and provide inertia without any active power production.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a question. So I know that in Sweden there is some like the FCR market, right? And some platform that you can bidding like 1 hour before to give some frequency service. And I would like to know that if you some like some aggregator of the like a lot of the electric vehicles, so how to get access or how to enter this market?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that, but there are some pre-qualification processes which you have to go through in order to provide these kind of services. And as an aggregator, you need to meet these kind of technical requirements that have been specified by the Nordic TSOs to enter the market.
So is there on the same platform to do the bidding or in another way?
That I don't know.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much for very good question. Now, last but not least, keynote speaker number 4, Professor Lars Nordström, who is the head of Electric Power and Energy Systems Division at KTH, and also partly, not partly expert, but partly part-time working as an expert at the Swedish TSO Svenska kraftnät. A bit of a Lars background. He's a professor in information systems for power system control at KTH and the head of division, as previously mentioned, and deputy head of the schools of electrical engineering, computer science. Specific responsibility he has for faculty development. And his research and teaching is mostly focusing on issues at the crossroads of control, communications, and power systems. And his research interests include future architectures, functionality, quality aspects of information communication systems for power system control, operation, automation, and protection. He's also previously served as a director of the Swedish Center of Electric Power Engineering and as a thematic leader for smart grids and electric storage in KIC InnoEnergy. In 2014, he was also visiting professor at Washington State University, author of many papers and journals and international conferences, senior member of IEEE, CIGRE and CIGRE, and past chairman of the Swedish Mirror Committee of IEEE TC 57. So Lars will tell us about controlling the digital power grid and tell us what do we need to know about it.
Thank you very much, Marina. And thank you. Are my slides showing? Because I'm sharing in another way. Oh, it's showing online, I mean.
Yeah, we can see.
We can see it online, great. So thanks for introducing me as partly an expert, because that's exactly what this speech is about. So the title says, controlling the digital power grid, what do we need to know? And the two important words here are we and know. So when Marina approached me to speak at this event, I wanted to discuss this particular question that I've been thinking about for the last 30 years or so. What do we need to know, and what we need to know? So first, obviously I have to say a few words about the digital power grid. So I Googled, and then you get some images, like they could look like that or something like this. Sometimes it's a bit like that, or this, and something, yeah. So it combines power, cyber, physical, AI, machine learning, and computers. It appears terribly complicated, and lots of work to do. Obviously, very interesting to all of us. So, perhaps a bit more serious approach to it. It seems that, I mean, to work and control and design and develop this digital power grid, you need to know a whole range of things. It's important to know these things: power systems, power electronics, electricity markets, machine learning, cybersecurity, 5G, 6G, IoT, sensor networks, etc., etc. This question then, as a university faculty professor, I think about this quite a lot in terms of how do we set up our courses, how do we set up our programs, what do we expect our students to know when they enter our programs, and what do we hope they learn when leaving our programs. Should we include weather, for instance, or not? Or is it 6G or 5G? What is it? And of course, now, since I have my part-time job also at Svenska kraftnät, I need to worry a bit about what do we need to know to get anything done? And what do I need to know and we need to know? And when to take us through this discussion, perhaps take me through this presentation, I thought it easier to work from an example. So I started with this example, which is strikingly close to what Robert talked a bit about. If we just take randomly out of the hat an example, let's say load frequency control, which is a secondary control mechanism. There's a little diagram there to the top. We have generators in two different areas. There's power flows on the tie lines, and we would put in place a AGC, or an automatic generation control, which is another term for LFC. And we want to restore the frequency to nominal values, and might also want to restore the tie line power flows to the nominal values. Such controllers are often put in place as a PI controller, and you need to be quite skilled in determining the controller parameters, CPI and the T there. You also need to know how to set up the area control error, which represents then the control objective, that you want to minimize this deviation in tie line power flow and restore the frequency. So this is an example of something that you could concern yourselves with in controlling a power system. And things that you need to know to be able to do this: well, electrical engineering, systems engineering, control systems. You need to know what these things are, and the tools that you might be working with to develop and analyze and validate your ideas are, well, MATLAB, Simulink, Python scripting, some PSSE, power flow tools, perhaps power factor, something like that. This seems to be something you need to know in order to develop load frequency controllers. But then again, you could also say that no, you have to know this thing. This is AFRR, automatic frequency restoration, which is one of those ancillary services which Robert was talking about earlier. And this slide is completely different. It says that, well, you have these different balancing services. For instance, the frequency containment reserve we discussed briefly. And those are all provided into a market. And there's these balance service providers that are interacting together with the transmission system operator on the market. And there are suppliers, there's balance responsible parties, there's generational load, oh, what's this? Actually, this is another perspective of load frequency control, where in a unbundled and deregulated power market like we have here in Western Europe and Sweden, we are separating generation from grid operation. And we have to understand that the electrical engineering technology that I had on the previous slide is actually existing within a market context. And of course, if we want to understand how my load frequency control service exists in this market context, I have to understand electricity markets. I need to understand optimization. I need to understand forecasting. And I might be using different tools when I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to set up a market and what's the best way to bid and provide services based on this LFC function. But then again, you could also look at it from this other perspective, that implicit in this picture is, of course, that there's several actors involved. It says balancing service providers, so there's a plural. There's going to be several actors on this market, and some of them are bidding for 1 hour, others are bidding for the other hour. Some are actually ordered to commit to a certain service, others are not because they were too expensive. So to actually agree and figure out how the information should be shared between these actors, which data should be shared, which bid will be accepted, how are the bids published on a marketplace, coming back to your question, what are the requirements for those bids, and if a bid is accepted, how do we make sure that the control signal is sent to the right unit, etc. That requires quite a lot of thinking in terms of which information should be shared, which are the standards we should use, how do we use, which open APIs can we use to actually access this data, and a whole other set of knowledge is needed in terms of perhaps software engineering and information models, and another toolbox opens up of unified modeling language models. But it gets worse, because once you've agreed on all of that, you also need to make sure that the data is actually moved from computer A to computer B. It's not just a diagram. I mean, this is just a drawing, this one, but actually getting bits to move from one computer on the left there to the computer on the right. There's a whole range of technical platforms that are involved that you need to share this information. It needs to go from one server or computer at perhaps the TSO to some aggregator, and from that aggregator to the unit that is to be activated, and back, and so on. And some of the data is critical. You don't want it to be spilled on the ground. Others to share it. And again, this requires a whole other set of tools and knowledges that you might need. So communication systems, computing platforms, cybersecurity, communication protocols, and well, a whole range of acronyms that you need to learn to be able to manage this. So coming back to the important words from my title, what do we need to know? It's, to me then, quite apparent that a single person, not even the man here, can know all of this, because, I mean, you might be able to know, and with know, I mean really master it, to be an expert, full 100% expert, then you know something, and I'm not there yet. But possibly there are some experts that know everything, but we can say for certain that there is not enough of those experts anyway. So this has sort of an implication then that the quality of, again, coming back to my example of this LFC function, is never going to be much better than the weakest link. We might have a perfectly designed control loop, which was made by a super clever engineer that had to make assumptions on availability of data. And then some clumsy ICT technician managed to make the FTP file transfer too slow, so there was a delay in the control signal anyway. Oh, okay, I like ICT engineers. I was just making an example again. But the weakest link might cause lots of problems for us. The calculation of the ACE, the area control error, for instance, if we're not getting data from the right positions in the right time, etc. And since we are deploying these digital power grids functions, if you like, it's going to be time consuming and quite expensive to get anything done, because it spans these very different domains and knowledge domains, and also for not in any way relating it to a company I happen to be working with, but I mean, usually companies are large, they have many departments and people and so on, so it can be time consuming. So I want to end in a positive note, of course, where it can be done, of course. So I was thinking a bit, what gets the job done then? I mean, we can't just hope that we will educate people that know everything from HTTP file transfers to ACE control errors, tuning, and by the way, UML modeling. We cannot squeeze all of that into an educational curriculum. So my personal experience from, well, the advantage of being slightly older, no longer valid for the CIGRE NGN. It's that you have experience, and this is based far outside my scientific domain, so I'm basing it purely on what I've seen during the years. That if you make sure that there's not too many people working on these things, small teams, because there are so many advantages of small teams. After a while, you get to know each other, and you get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and communication in the team is efficient. I mean, team sizes at universities are usually quite small. 5 to 10 PhD students, master students, which is a very efficient grouping. Make sure that if you look at these domains that I was presenting as some sort of onions or a core knowledge, we need to start obviously with electrical engineering, but then again, this is where we are at. So I would, perhaps if I was giving this speech in computer science, I would not say so, but I am. Because only when you really know what the core function is about, can you provide some guidance on acceptable priorities and quality limits and compromises that the other parts of the chain can do. Make sure to talk technology in this little team. As I'm saying at the end, you cannot learn anything from a PowerPoint slide, which I find to be a very interesting meta statement. You need to look at code and look at communication protocols and understand what happens on the inside. I think this is, to get philosophical, there's no danger at all with AI. There's a big danger with lazy people that don't want to figure out how machines work on the inside. Then the machine can do stupid things, so it doesn't have to be intelligent at all. We need to know what the machines do. We have to have a curious environment and ask stupid questions, and make sure that we're also always working iteratively, so we know what we're doing. We cannot just make slides. Okay, that was hopefully ending in a positive note. I'm a bit short on time, and of course I have to end with a quote of an expert. So to know what you know and what you do not know, that is true knowledge then. So making sure which part of this you know, and find the people that know the other stuff, and then don't be afraid to ask them. And so that's what I think, coming back to the two important words of this talk then. What do we need to know? So thanks.
Thank you, Lars. First an applaud, then some questions perhaps.
Some questions perhaps.
Do we have some questions in the room or online? Or in the chat? I was thinking about something, but let's see if someone else has a question first. Maybe I just go forward. It was a lot of good information, and from the educational perspective, like there is such a list of what we could know. So it's a lot.
Yes.
And then, like, what would you say or recommend to a student or a young professional? We have many today here. Like, what could they focus on when they're studying for towards an electrical engineering degree or so? So we perhaps know what we could educate, but what is that they can focus on to be able to practice the knowledge that they.
Yeah, something I may be talking out of my own weaknesses and prejudices, but I think that if I had, as a student, earlier broken out of the box of like trusting a tool and started to do a bit of my own coding, I think I would have learned a bit more. It's very convenient to download already developed models and enter parameters and press play and get the simulation chart. I've done that repeatedly through my life. And then you get results and you're finished and you can go to that party that you were missing. Instead, don't go to parties. The thing is, when I start personally, I'm going to do this myself. I end up coding. It doesn't really ever work. But it gives me a satisfaction of knowing what the people that develop the tool have gone through, and then I can start using their tool. So being a bit, like I said, try to build it yourself first, but of course you might fail, or it will take too long time, and then resort to the tools.
I definitely do agree on that. To try to do some calculations by hand with your calculator, with MATLAB or some kind of tool, and then you start using some kind of specialized program for it.
Yeah, because then you know a bit more, and you respect perhaps better the people that developed the tool because they did a lot of work. Yeah.
No, we're a bit over time and Louise has left, but perhaps a wrap-up question for our keynote speakers. Now we have two that are in the room and still present in the meeting. So today we talked about the development of power and energy systems, so very different questions: stability, control, support actions, digitalization, policies. What do we need to know? So the set of skills that is needed. But then, so what is the power and energy system of the future is going to look like in the perhaps most optimal scenario, if there is such, and if there is no, which alternatives do we have which are good enough with their pros and cons? And what can we as power and energy industry professionals and citizens of the world, what can we do to contribute to such development? Lars and Robert. Lars.
I think it's a very, very, very good question, but also very, very tricky to answer. At least one perspective would be that it would be good if we could have a very secure and reliable system, and we could provide electricity at a very low cost. How to get there, we don't know. But I think it's also perhaps not only the end goal, I think it's also the transition that is important. How do we reach there? And perhaps I think we need to give some incentives to move faster to that kind of end goal and not just leave it and then we see what happens, because then we might not reach, or we will have some kind of end goal, but perhaps not what we want. So we need to sort of move in the right direction. And for that, I think we need some incentives in development.
Yeah, and I think I picked up one thing from the very first presentation on predicting electricity usage post-COVID in commercial buildings. And COVID is an important thing because it changed the behavior so dramatically. And coming back then to how we develop the power system, the unfortunate events in the world the last year, which has wars and stuff, is also an event of the same magnitude as the pandemic, in terms of, at least where here I'm seeing the idea of a liberalized and distributed shared market solution to everything is put in some question, where instead, there is some concern that perhaps we need to have some sort of centralized national control. The pandemic brought that up too. We didn't have any mouth masks in Sweden because nobody was buying them, obviously, before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, nobody had them. And there was this question, we should have had a stockpile. And perhaps the development, answering the question on the future power grid would have been easier 2-3 years ago when the world was a slightly better place. But now I think it's interesting in a way that either we could end up in a very protectionistic national way where we centralize rather than distribute, or we could go ahead with the distribution. I realized that in Louise's presentation, she was not referring to the state of the world, but the fact that they had chosen a centralized approach to the expansion of offshore wind, yeah, which we, for instance, have not done here. I mean, everyone's bidding for all sorts of various things in Sweden. So there is always a choice, centralized, which has certain optimal values, and decentralized, which has worked well. I think that has made large parts of the world quite rich. But yeah, so that's going to be interesting to watch. I don't think that was a positive note, but.
So, thank you very much. I would very much like to thank to all the presenters and the participants in this event. And then you're very welcome to contact either us or our presenters, keynote speakers, and then we will, this recording will be available afterwards, and slides from our presenters.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much for a very good discussion event. So now we can stop recording. Yeah.